Hi, y'all. Welcome back to New and Transparent. On this new episode, we are still continuing with the life book, and we are on chapter 5 if you're keeping along.
Yes. So in the last episode, we left off when Jesus calms a storm and they're in a boat. And now Jesus has stepped out of the boat and now he heals a man with a demon. So it says, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. So like as soon as he stepped off, there was
No break.
no break. And this unclean man lived among the tombs, and no one had the strength to like contain this man. And what caught my attention was that when this unclean spirit, when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. And I thought that was like interesting, and that like stood out to me because the demon possessed man ran to Jesus. And when I was reading this, I was like, well, I mean, you wouldn't expect that, you wouldn't expect like for an unclean demon possessed man to run to Jesus. I think you would expect him to like run away from him, like if you see Jesus, you're like, oh my gosh, let me leave. But it was like, that's interesting, that this man ran to Jesus. And moving forward, this unclean man, like he runs to Jesus and he says, what have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? We see that again, Jesus, Son of the Most High God. And I wrote, unclean spirits have the right theological facts because they know the true identity of Jesus better than the religious leaders did. Yet it's not a faith or knowledge of Jesus that could save. It was more out of fear and authority of Jesus, And like in all the stories that we've seen about the unclean spirits are always like Son of the Most High God, or Jesus is the Lord, And they know,
They recognize
yeah,
Jesus holds.
But it's not like they know him out of fear and authority. It's not like they know that like I just said, it's not like they know him as a Jesus that can save, but it is the Jesus that can save. And in the story it says, for he was saying to him, Jesus was saying, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. And Jesus asked him, what is your name? And I was like, in the other stories that we've read and seen about the unclean spirits, we've never Jesus has never asked a demon possessed, what is their name? But in this instance, he did. And the demon replied, my name is Legion, for we are many. And I wrote that in a way, the unclean spirit tried to have significance by saying we are many, because it was like kind of like what I guess imagine in my head was that he was trying to intimidate Jesus by saying we are many and you're
They were just
one.
trying to like belittle Jesus.
Yeah, but I mean that didn't hold Jesus back. It was like there's nothing that Jesus can't do. And the unclean man, he begged Jesus earnestly not to send him out of the country. And there was like a herd of pigs, and they were just there, right? And the unclean man said, send us to the pigs, let us enter them. So he gave them permission. And I think that's like really interesting too, those words. He gave him permission. Yeah. Like it's always until Jesus speaks and gives you permission that something changes. That something is enabled, And I just thought that was like, like it's interesting that Jesus, like, until he gave him permission,
they did it.
Yeah, like the unclean spirit went into the pigs, and I was like, oh, And it says here, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs.
Poor pigs.
Yeah, and that's just like, a pretty impactful story. And then moving on, people came to see what had happened. Just like every other story, people are like, oh my goodness, what did Jesus do now? And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. You know, they had seen this man for, I don't know, like a long time, and they were like, oh, that man, ooh, get away from him because he's unclean. And now that Jesus comes, they see that this man is right. You know, they see that he's clean. They see that he's no longer, you know, yelling, no longer cutting himself. And they're like, what? Like,
They're afraid.
they were afraid,
Nah, that's
you know,
crazy.
and they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region because they were afraid. And I remember one time a pastor preached about this instance, and it was saying that when Jesus drastically changes something, people instantly are afraid, you know, and that's what we see in this story, that the people were afraid because of what Jesus had done, because they were so used to this man living one way that when he, like, his life turned around, they were like, what? Like, if he did that, what else is he gonna do? You know, in a way, that's how I guess envisioned them. And I wrote that the people were actually, I think I got this from a commentary, and it was at 9. I was like, oh. But it said the people were more afraid of what Jesus will do in their lives than what Satan does in the moment.
Oh, that's so
They
true.
often push Jesus away.
That's so true.
And they pushed Jesus away. You know, they were like, no, depart, like, leave. And then Jesus says, go home to your friends. He tells the man that he had cleaned, go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has mercy on you.
And before this, it also says that he begged Jesus to go with him. He was like,
The unclean man, not the other people. The other people were like, leave.
yeah, the unclean man, after he was set free, he was like, Jesus, take me with you. Like, I want to go with you. And Jesus was like, no, stay home and let the other people know what the Lord has done for you. And the man was already set free, and yet he still wanted to be with Jesus. And he didn't want to be with Jesus just because Jesus set him free, but he wanted to be Jesus because of what Jesus did in his life, you know?
Yeah, like, I mean, like I said, like, this, I pretty sure this man, he felt hopeless for himself.
Yeah.
You know, he was like, no, like, well, I don't even know.
Like, what do you even...
I don't even know how he felt, obviously. But, like, I guess he was, like, you know, like hopeless, and, like...
He was probably, like, just, like, he accepted it, the fact that he was never gonna go back to the way he was.
Yeah, and then now that his life completely changes, like, he wants Jesus to stay there with him. And it's interesting because you see two sides of the story here. People want Jesus to leave, but some people want him to stay. But it's like, you have to desire it in your heart, just like this man. He desired for Jesus to stay because he knew of the authority and capability that he had for his life. And these other people that wanted him to depart, they were like, no, leave. Like, I don't.
They were
like,
afraid of
Yeah, they were afraid of the power of Jesus. But actually, I think this is one of my favorite stories to this one that we just talked about, because you just see, like, how once you give permission to Jesus, you know,
he can enter your life.
he can enter your life and drastically change your life for the better.
Because like we said a few episodes back, how God is a gentle God, and he unless you give him permission to go into your heart, then he will. But if you don't, then he's not gonna forces himself in your heart.
Yeah, and I also, like, love this story because it just makes me reflect on how like, Jesus can change your life. And I'm like, if he can do that, you know, he can also do that in my life. And we go on to the next story, and here Jesus heals a woman and Jairus' daughter. This is also one of my favorites. It's so good. It's so good.
It has so much, like, like, patience, like, love,
everything. Like, I think, this story is pretty good. So listen carefully because it's really good. So Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, and a great crowd gathered about him. And one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus, came and saw Jesus, and he fell at the feet of Jesus. And he was saying, my little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and alive.
I was gonna say this, that I was reading a commentary to it. It said how he was like, come and lay your hands on her.
Yeah, I literally highlighted that.
Because that's the only way that God, like, physically healing someone, that God would always like touch him or like hold their hand or like something like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So they imagined God healing people by touching them. So
Yeah,
that's why he was
I
like,
read
come
something
and-
like that too.
Yeah.
That's all the obviously, like, you know, we're humans, and like when you see something happening, you're like, oh, that's the only way it can be done.
Exactly.
And so I read something like that too, that he said, come lay your hands, because that was all they had known.
And it's
But
so
they did it.
ironic with the next ministry.
Oh, yeah. But Jairus went to Jesus in desperation. You know, he was like, please, like
Nothing else.
the
like,
fact when you fall at someone's feet, that means you're like very desperate.
yeah.
And for Jairus to fall to like Jesus' feet, he was like desperate for a miracle. He was like, no, like, please, like, come and help me. And then the next part says, and he went with him. Jesus goes once you invite him. You know, Jairus was like, please come, and Jesus goes, you know. So once again, going
He
back
had
to
the faith that most people don't have.
Yeah.
He knew that Jesus was the only way that his daughter was going to be saved.
and even like, I guess, in a way, confidence and being vulnerable to let God into your situation. And a great crowd followed him, right? And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. So the woman was between all this crowd. You know, she was
she was
in there. She was like,
she had
I'm ready to receive. She was like, I'm ready to receive.
she had
my
a
blessing.
goal in mind.
Yeah. So this, I really like both of these stories combined, and I think it's so like unique how both of these are like,
They all tie together.
yeah. Okay, so this woman, she had suffered a lot, right? And she had seen many doctors, and she spent so much money, you know, and everything, and no doctor had the right answer. They're like, oh, well, no,
Go to the next one.
that's it. You're gonna live like that forever, you know. And she had heard the reports about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. So this, once again, like, this woman, she had heard, you know, like, I relate to this in a way when, like, you know, when you're so sick and you're like, oh my gosh, like, and you're going to so many doctors, and then this woman, she hears, no, there's someone that can actually heal you, and he has healed so many. And so this woman, she's like, oh my goodness,
I want to go.
yeah. So she's like, okay, I gotta get to him. You know, I have to get myself there. And it's kind of going back, now that I think about it, back to what we said in the last episode. You have to be interested. You have to be willing. And this woman, she was willing to do whatever was necessary to get her healing. So she heard about Jesus, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna go. And I love this next part, that the woman, she said, if I touch even his garments, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well.
She was certain of what she was saying. She was like, I know that if only if I just touch it.
That's all she was like, you know, I gotta touch him, like, a little bit, like, even if I barely like a little, I just gotta touch it, you know. And she just, that's amazing that she just wanted to touch Jesus.
That's the faith we need to have. Like, that's like,
Yeah. And once she touches Jesus, because she did touch him, you know, immediately the flow of blood dried up. Immediately. Yes, I like pulled that and circled that, because immediately, it wasn't like days later, hours later, it was like right away,
like right there.
right away, she was healed. Because not because of, oh, you know, just because. No, she was healed because of her faith, because once again, going back to, even if I touch his garments, you know, and that's crazy. And this woman, she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. You know, she felt it. She was like, I'm healed. You know, and Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him. that was like, I think I saw a TikTok, or I don't know, something on social media, and I think it was like an episode, like a little clip of The Chosen, where like Jesus like stops because he like like feels like the power, like, you know, that someone touched him, and that like he feels that a sense of power had gone out from him. And that's crazy. Like, I was trying to like imagine that, and I was like, that's wild. But they back in this time, when someone like this woman, she was bleeding for 12 years, she was considered unclean. You know, and she wanted to do this secretly because she
really embarrassed.
yeah, she was embarrassed, and she considered herself unworthy. You know, like it for 12 years she was bleeding, and like I can imagine a bunch of people were like, no, get away from me, you're unclean, if you touch me, you're gonna make me unclean. And that's why she was like, even if I touch his garment, you know, like something, like, that's all I wanted, you know, because she couldn't, you know, because she was unclean. So she, in a way, she did it secretly, but I mean, Jesus felt the power.
He was like,
Yeah. And Jesus said to the crowd, who touched my garments? I can imagine like the woman, like her heart dropping, like, oh my goodness, you know. And the disciples said to him, you see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, who touched me? And it was like a bunch of people, like, I don't know.
I imagine like everyone pushing.
Yeah, like, no, me. Yeah. And then the disciples are like, why are you asking that question? Like, it's such a dumb question to ask, you know, like, why are you asking that? But I mean, Jesus knew, you know, he knew that, like, the reason to ask that question, and he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. And that statement, daughter, your faith has made you well, it was Jesus clarifying to her that she was healed, you know, because she felt it. But I mean, like us humans, there's always that sense of doubt, and she was probably like, oh,
am I like crazy? Like,
yeah. But Jesus telling you, no, you are made well, that was like her, okay, I am actually,
her confirmation.
Yeah, her confirmation of her being healed. And then I wrote also, our sin doesn't make Jesus a sinner, it makes us clean. You know, this woman, she probably thought, oh, if I touch Jesus, I'm gonna make him unclean. But it's the other way around. It made her clean by touching Jesus. So this story,
and the fact that it wasn't the fact that she touched the garment, it was her faith that healed her. It wasn't the what.
I think even if she wouldn't have touched the garment, and her faith, you know, like that's enough. Like, your faith takes you places, and it's always the major part of anything in spiritual and Christian life is your faith, you know. And that's a major part of this story, and not just this story, but stories, the faith that you have to have. And so moving on, while he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house, you know, don't forget about Jairus, because this is still happening within the story of like Jairus. And like it was actually, like, I guess a little backstory, like, you know, Jairus went with met up with Jesus, and Jesus was like, okay, let me go with you. And then in the midst of like them walking to Jairus's house, they were like, the woman, like the whole instance of the woman appears, you know. And I can imagine Jairus like being all mad, like, are you for real? Like, come on. Yeah, like come on, I just told you my daughter's dying, and you're healing this woman.
He was probably like, nah, yeah, like,
I asked first, come on. Yeah. So you know, then they tell Jairus, your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? You know, I can imagine
someone telling you that.
Yeah. And I guess in a way they were like, no, don't ask Jesus to come anymore. Your daughter's dead. Like, leave it alone. You know, what's the point? Don't bother him. But there is nothing impossible for God. Nothing. Like, not even death can stop Jesus, you know. But overhearing what they had said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, I love this, do not fear, only believe. And like, imagine like first he tell you, no, your daughter's dead, and then Jesus like, don't fear, only believe. Like, oh, that's crazy. And no, what's interesting here is that no one followed him except Peter, James, and John. So they went with Jesus. They went to like go to with Jairus' daughter as well. And they came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. You know, people were like crying. Yeah. And I read in a commentary that back then it was I guess a tradition to hire someone that would, I don't know if you know this, someone that would cry in like with someone. Yeah, they would hire like people that would cry and make a whole commotion, like when someone would die. So you know, there was a bunch of people like weeping, and when Jesus entered, he said to them, why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead but sleeping. Oh, that's
so powerful.
That is, because like, no, she's not dead, she's sleeping. Like
what are you doing? Like, what is it?
Yeah. And they laughed at him.
They laughed at Jesus.
And that's goes with what I just said. You know, these people that were hired to like cry and make a whole commotion, they laughed at him. They were like their mood instantly changed, and they were like,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, but he put them all outside. He was like, go outside. And that just shows, like, you know, there can't be any unbelief and any disbelief. Because then they don't go together.
Because fear and faith don't go together.
They don't
at all. Like, no. Either you have fear or you have faith. Like, you can't have
both. You can't have both. Like, if fear's so persistent in your life,
then there's no faith present at all.
Yeah. Literally. And that's harsh, but it's the truth. Yes.
And Jairus, he decided to put his fear aside, and he chose to believe in Jesus.
Yeah. So actually no, let me not skip any parts because this story is so good. So Jesus was like, go outside, you know, and he took the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and he went in there where the child was, taking her by the hand, and he said to her, little girl, I say to you, arise. And what's interesting is that you know how at first we had mentioned that Jairus was like, come and lay your hands on her. You know, that's the first part before everything happens. And then here Jesus takes her by the hand. So that made a connection with that, like that Jesus like gets this girl by the hand, and he's like, little girl, I say to you, get up.
Like,
and
to wake up.
Yeah. And just by like Jesus touching her, you know, the faith and the power it is shown. And Jesus spoke to this dead girl as if she was alive, you know.
Dang, man, it's so powerful.
And immediately, once again, the girl got up and began walking. Yes. So Jesus spoke to this girl with the power of God, and she was raised from the dead. You know, and raising someone from the dead, that's only like a God thing that he can do, you know. And
yeah,
you just see the power and authority over and over again, you know. And this girl, she was 12 years of age. And I make the connection because this girl was 12 years of age, and the woman was discharge of blood for 12 years. So there's a connection. And I read in this commentary too that Jairus was going through, like, you know, his little daughter provided him those 12 years of joy, and this woman those 12 years of agony. And it's just like interesting how there's so much similarity in these stories,
because like it was similarities and differences, because the woman was healed publicly and the little girl was healed secretly. Like, it's so ironic. And also because the woman was healed immediately. Like, she was like, Jesus, I'm right here, like, and she was healed. But then Jairus had to walk and he had to wait, and they were like, oh, well, your daughter's dead. But then God, the little girl's miracle came with a delay. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like Jairus had to, in a way, I feel like his faith grew in the process.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, because there's I can imagine like Jairus, like, you know, seeing the woman getting healed, and he's like, okay, what about my daughter though?
Yeah, like, okay,
You know? And I kind of like see it like us, you know, like when someone receives a blessing before you, like, okay, what about me though?
Like, when am I next?
Yeah, but Jesus probably in the back of it is like, wait a little, you know, I don't know what I'm doing, wait a little. I can heal everyone. You just gotta be patient. And I think that's a major part in the story of Jairus.
The way Jesus worked was so different, like, with the stories, but yeah, they were so similar. And the way Jesus worked was so different within the stories, but yet the power remained the same. And Jesus made everything so personal with the woman and with Jairus's daughter. Like, he made everything so personal to each of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And these stories, they're, like you said, they're so similar in a way, because like Jairus wanted Jesus to touch his daughter, and the woman wanted to touch Jesus.
Yeah.
And it just like amazes me, like a simple touch of Jesus is all you need. You know, even if you just like touch his garment, like that's enough.
Yeah.
That's more than enough.
Like the song, like when I would hear the song in church, I don't know if you guys heard it. It's in Spanish, but it's something like, it's about this story, and I'm like, oh, like, okay, whatever. She just touched it, like,
yeah.
And now, like, I truly understand, like, she just touched it, like, that's all she did.
That's all she did. And it's crazy because people can be like, well, she just touched it. She just touched Jesus.
That's the whole point.
Like, yeah, and you're like, no, that's what you should be doing.
Yeah.
But that story, one of my favorite stories. And then we go to Jesus rejected at Nazareth. Jesus is constantly rejected. First, we see that in the city of where the demon possessed man was, they were like, leave.
They were afraid.
And Jesus, like we said, he's obedient, so he left. He left. Simple. You know, if you tell Jesus, I don't want you in my life anymore,
you leave.
Yeah, because you have to be the one, like we've been saying, you have to be the one willing to like accept Jesus. You have to be the one maintaining and being interested in Jesus, truly. And Jesus, after, like, you know, he healed Jairus' daughter and the woman, he went away from there and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. And on the Sabbath, he began to teach in the synagogue. And many who had heard him were astonished. You know, they were like, wow, the teachings of Jesus, you know. And they began to ask, where did this man get these things? What is the wisdom given to him? How are such mighty works done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary and brother of James? And in a way, I was like, well, those are reasonable questions, you know what I mean? I guess, like, you know, humanly formed, again, a way of thinking, like, how, you know, like, what?
Like how questioning?
Yeah. And what caught my attention was that, you know, this was his hometown, right? This is where everything started, where Jesus grew up. And so they knew he was a carpenter, and they knew of Jesus as that was it, you know. And then he comes back with disciples, and they're like, who is this man? What is he doing? You know, what happened? So in a way, I feel like that's how we are too, you know, because like when someone drastically changes, you're like, well, what happened? You know, like blah blah blah. So I was like, well, yeah, those are reasonable things. And they were like, you know, well, and Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and among his relatives and in his household. Jesus was rejected because of all the questions that they would ask him. And I read also in the commentary that by them describing that he was a carpenter, they were making fun of him.
Yeah, and like they were like they would be like, isn't he just the son of Mary? Like, isn't he just the carpenter?
Yeah.
Like, they were like, who are you trying to be? You know, like.
Yeah. And they rejected him simply, like, fast, you know? And he could not do no mighty work there. That's except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. That's crazy because he couldn't do any mighty work there. That's crazy to me, but he still healed people. You know, so in my head I'm like, what out? You know, like what there is more. Yeah, there's more that Jesus can do. Like healing people, that's
like your whole miracle right there.
But he could do no mighty work there. So he could have done way more than just heal people. But their unbelief, you know, was too bad. And here it says, and he marveled because of their unbelief, their lack of faith. You know, the work of Jesus in a way was limited. It is limited in an atmosphere of unbelief. Like we said, like if you don't believe, that doesn't go. You know, like you have to believe.
Yeah, you have to be the one who's like, I believe in God. Like right now, like with Jairus, when he was like, he like just believe. That's all he had to do, believe, and he believed, and he received the miracle.
Yeah, and these people, they didn't. And it says, and he went among the villages teaching. He was like, and I didn't write it, but it's in my head that if you don't accept Jesus, someone else is. You might reject Jesus, but someone else isn't going to reject Jesus. And Jesus isn't going to stop because someone rejected him. No, he's going to go on teaching. He's going to go on healing, you know. And I kind of like, I guess in a way reflected that to my life. Like we said last time, you can only do so much by planting a seed in someone. And if that seed doesn't sprout in another person, then someone else is going to like, you know.
Yeah.
There's truly receive it.
That true.
Yeah, and you have to like from these stories, and we're actually gonna stop there. We just went over those few stories because they're so impactful. They're really good stories that apply to our lives. You know, like something so simple that can drastically change your life.
Yeah, I feel like I personally have overlooked these stories, but now that I'm actually like reading them and like really like paying attention to the small details, it's like it's so powerful.
Yeah, it's the small details, literally, like simply from we see the demon possessed man running to Jesus, you know,
like I would just read over that, but now I'm like,
yeah, he ran, and what's stopping us from running to Jesus? Exactly. You know, and then going to the woman who simply touched Jesus's garment, like, you know, more than enough. And then going to Jairus, he was patient enough and willing to believe that his daughter could be healed by Jesus, you know, and simple, like Jesus telling the girl, little girl, I say to you, arise, you know. And she just, yeah, the all of that is so powerful. And then ending with the story that we just did, if you don't accept Jesus, someone else is, you know, and it's harsh, but like we said, it's the truth. It's the truth, you know. And so these stories, they're good. They're good stories. They're impactful, and they really make me think about my life. They really make me analyze my life. And it's just like Jesus is so good, and he works in so many ways, like you said, personal to you. And these stories genuinely touch my heart.
We have to stop being afraid of what Jesus can do in our life.
Yeah. Don't tell Jesus to leave, but tell him to stay. Yeah. So that was it for today's episode. A little different, like we said, yeah. Because we only went over like one chapter. We actually stopped, if you're following along, in page 36, and we will continue on next week. But thank you so much for watching and listening.
We truly appreciate every single one of you guys. It means a lot.
Yes. So thank you so much. God bless you.